The metal walls of Outpost Station 47 creaked in their endless dance with the vacuum of space. Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen sat alone in the communications room, her eyes fixed on the dancing lines of the signal monitor. The midnight shift was usually quiet, filled only with routine check-ins from supply ships and automated beacons. But tonight was different. She heard it again, a strange sound unlike anything in her 12 years of communications experience. It wasn't the harsh static of solar winds or the rhythmic pulses of dying stars. This sound was alive, a cry that seemed to reach straight into her chest and squeeze. Sarah leaned closer to her console, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls. The signal was weak, barely there, like a whisper in a thunderstorm. But it was definitely coming from the restricted zone, the part of space that belonged to the Vask. Everyone knew about the Vask, tall, gray-skinned aliens who looked down on humans as primitive newcomers to the galactic community. They kept to themselves in their sector of space, and that's how they liked it. No visitors, no traders, no diplomats. Sarah pressed her hand against her temple, trying to focus on the strange cry. It wasn't random noise. There was a pattern to it, something almost like music, but filled with pain. The translation software was useless, spitting out error messages and gibberish. Computer, replay signal, increase amplitude by 40%, she commanded. The sound filled the small room again, clearer this time. Sarah felt goosebumps rise on her arms. Whatever was making that sound, it was in distress. She pressed the comm button on her desk. "Lieutenant Rogers?" "Sir, I need you to hear something." A few minutes later, her commanding officer walked in, looking annoyed at being disturbed. He was a tall man with graying hair and permanent frown lines. "This better be important, Chen. It's 200 hours. Sarah played the recording. Rogers listened for exactly 30 seconds before shaking his head. "It's space noise, Sergeant. Probably some magnetic interference from the Vask's defense systems." "Sir, with respect, I don't think so. Listen to the pattern. It's too regular, too structured. Something intelligent is making this sound." Rogers' frown deepened. "Even if you're right, and I'm not saying you are, that's Vask's space. We have treaties. We don't stick our noses in their business. They don't stick their noses in ours. That's how we keep the peace." "But sir, if someone's in trouble..." "That's an order, Sergeant. Log it as atmospheric interference and move on. We're not starting an incident over some static." After Rogers left, Sarah sat back in her chair, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was listening to something important. She began running her own analysis, breaking down the signal into its component parts. Hours passed as she worked, her coffee growing cold beside her. Just before dawn shift, she found something. Hidden in the background of the cry were numbers, coordinates repeated over and over again. She cross-referenced them with the station's star charts. The signal was coming from a small moon orbiting a gas giant, deep in Vask territory. Sarah's hands hovered over the controls. She should delete this, forget about it. Follow orders. Keep the peace. The cry came again, weaker this time. Sarah thought about all the stories she'd heard about the Vask, about their secret research facilities, about the species that had mysteriously disappeared after crossing paths with them. Species like the Luminary, with their beautiful, glowing skin and their abilities that some call magic. She made her decision. Her fingers moved quickly, copying the signal data to her personal device. Someone was out there, crying for help, and only she could hear them. As the dawn shift crew began filing in, Sarah gathered her things, her mind already forming a plan. She might be the only one who could help, but she would need to be smart about it. Because if she was wrong, she wouldn't just be risking her career, she would be risking war. Sarah Chen knew she had exactly 45 minutes before anyone would notice she was gone. The night shift always took that long to file their reports, and the morning crew would be busy with their coffee and check-ins. She walked quickly through the station's corridors, trying to look normal. Her heart was beating fast, but her face stayed calm. Years of military training had taught her how to hide her feelings. The hangar bay was almost empty when she reached it. Only one mechanic was there, working under a supply ship. Sarah nodded to him as she passed, holding up her security badge. The mechanic barely looked up. Her target was in the far corner. A small stealth shuttle used for emergency repairs. It wasn't the fastest ship, but it was hard to detect on scanners. More importantly, it had enough fuel to reach those coordinates she'd found. Sarah's hands shook slightly as she entered her access code. What she was about to do would end her career. 12 years of service thrown away. But that cry for help kept playing in her mind, impossible to ignore. The shuttle's door opened with a soft hiss. Sarah climbed inside and started the pre-flight checks. She had done this hundreds of times during training, but this time was different. This time, she was stealing military property. A red light started flashing on her console. Someone in control was calling. Sarah took a deep breath and pressed the button. "Shuttle 4, you don't have clearance for launch," a bored voice said. "Please verify your authorization." Sarah's fingers flew over the controls, sending the emergency override codes she had memorized years ago. They were only supposed to be used if the station was under attack. Using them now was another serious crime to add to her list. "Authorization accepted," the computer said. "Emergency protocols engage." The hangar doors began to open. Sarah fired up the engines, her training taking over. Behind her, alarms started to sound. She had maybe 2 minutes before security arrived. The shuttle lifted off smoothly. Through the window, Sarah saw people running into the hangar, waving their arms. Lieutenant Rogers was among them, his face red with anger. "Staff Sergeant Chen," his voice crackled over the radio. "Land that shuttle immediately." "That's a direct order." Sarah switched off the radio. The shuttle shot through the hangar doors into open space. Warning shots from the station's defense turrets flashed past her, but they were just for show. No one would risk hitting the shuttle. It was too expensive. As soon as she was clear of the station, Sarah activated the stealth systems. The shuttle seemed to fade away, becoming almost invisible against the stars. Now came the hard part. She pulled up the coordinates from the mysterious signal. They led deep into Vask space, at least 12 hours away at full speed. The Vask were known for shooting first and never bothering to ask questions later. Sarah checked her supplies. She had her sidearm, some emergency rations, and basic medical supplies. Not much for a rescue mission in enemy territory, but there was no turning back now. As she set course for the coordinates, Sarah thought about her family back on Earth. Her mother had always said she was too stubborn for her own good, too quick to help others without thinking about herself. Maybe her mother was right. But then the signal came again, clearer now that she was in space. That haunting cry, filled with pain and loneliness. Sarah straightened in her seat and pushed the engines harder. Someone out there needed help. Maybe she was throwing her life away for nothing. Maybe it was a trap. But if there was even a small chance that she could save someone from whatever was causing those cries, she had to try. The shuttle disappeared into the darkness of space, carrying its lone human pilot toward whatever waited in vast territory. Sarah Chen, now officially AWOL, settled in for the long flight, wondering if she would live long enough to regret her decision. 12 hours of tense flying brought Sarah's stolen shuttle to a massive space station orbiting a gray moon. The Vask research facility looked like a giant metal spider, with long arms stretching out from a central hub. Dark metal plates covered its surface, making it blend with the starry background. Sarah's hands were steady on the controls even though her heart was racing. The stealth systems were working so far. No alarms, no patrol ships coming to shoot her down. But one wrong move would change that fast. She checked her scanner again. The crying signal was definitely coming from somewhere inside that station. It was weaker now, almost like whoever was making it was getting tired. "Hold on," Sarah whispered to nobody. "I'm coming." She found a blind spot between two sensor arrays and guided her shuttle toward a maintenance airlock. The Vask were incredibly advanced, but they had one weakness. They were too confident. They never expected anyone would dare to break into their facilities. Sarah put on her combat suit and checked her oxygen levels. The suit was designed for human soldiers, but it had some useful features for sneaking around: basic camouflage, sound dampening, and environmental protection. She would need all of them. The airlock was easy to hack. The Vask used complex mathematical codes, but they never changed them. Sarah had studied their security systems during her training. Within minutes, she was inside the station. The corridors were tall and wide, built for the Vask's large bodies. Everything was clean and silent, with pale blue lights casting soft shadows. Sarah moved carefully, pressing against walls whenever she heard footsteps. She saw her first Vask after 10 minutes. It was at least 8 feet tall, with gray skin that looked like polished stone. Its 4 arms moved with precise, careful movements as it worked at a control panel. Sarah held her breath as she slipped past it. Following the signal led her deeper into the station. She passed laboratories filled with strange equipment. Through windows, she saw things that made her stomach turn. Tanks filled with floating creatures, machines that pulsed with weird energy, and worse. The crying was getting stronger. Sarah's neural implant, standard issue for human soldiers, started to tingle at the base of her skull. Something about that cry was affecting it. Then she found the holding cells. They lined a long corridor, each one sealed with energy fields. Most were empty. The few that weren't, Sarah forced herself to look away. She couldn't help everyone. She had to find the source of that cry. At the end of the corridor was a special cell, larger than the others. Inside, floating in a strange blue liquid, was something Sarah had only seen in historical records. It was a luminary. A female, her skin covered in faint, glowing patterns that pulsed weakly. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that hummed and beeped. Her eyes were closed, but her mouth was moving slightly, making that haunting cry that had brought Sarah across space. Sarah checked her scanner. No Vask nearby. She moved to the cell's control panel and started working. The Vask security was stronger here, but Sarah had come too far to stop now. The luminary's eyes suddenly opened. They were pure white, glowing like stars. She looked directly at Sarah, and suddenly the crying stopped. Instead, Sarah heard a voice in her head, weak but clear. "You heard me." Sarah nodded, still working on the controls. "I heard you. I'm getting you out of here." "Why?" the voice asked. "You are human." The Vask said humans were too primitive to hear our calls. Sarah smiled grimly as the energy field started to flicker. "Yeah, well, the Vask get a lot of things wrong about humans." Alarms suddenly started blaring throughout the station. Sarah cursed. She was running out of time. But as the energy field finally died, she saw the luminary smile for the first time. Now came the hard part, getting out alive. Sarah worked quickly to disconnect the tubes from the luminary's body. The alien woman was weak, barely able to stand on her own. Up close, Sarah could see that the glowing patterns on her skin weren't natural. They were surgical scars created by Vask experiments. "My name is Zyra." The voice spoke in Sarah's mind. "The machines, they use them to test my abilities." "I'm Sarah," she replied, supporting Zyra's weight. "Can you walk?" Before Zyra could answer, heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. Sarah helped Zyra behind a large machine, just as 3 Vask guards rushed in. They were wearing combat armor, carrying weapons that pulsed with strange energy. "The specimen must not escape," one guard said in a deep, rumbling voice. "The project is too important." Sarah's mind raced. Her small military pistol wouldn't do much against their armor. She needed a plan. Fast. Suddenly, she felt a tingling in her neural implant. Zyra's voice came again, but different this time. "Scared. Your mind. It has technology in it." "Yes," Sarah whispered. "Standard military implant. Helps with targeting, communications. Maybe I can." Zyra's glowing patterns brightened. Sarah felt a strange pressure in her head, Then something clicked. The world changed. She could suddenly sense everything around her. The guards' positions, their weapons' energy signatures, even their thoughts. It was overwhelming. "I'm sorry." Zyra's voice came clearer now. "I've created a link between us. Your implant, it amplifies my abilities. I've never been able to connect with a human before." Sarah fought down her panic and focused. Through their connection, she could feel Zyra's memories flooding in. Years of painful experiments, the Vask trying to turn her natural psychic abilities into a weapon. "They want to control minds," Zyra explained. "My people resisted their power naturally. They killed the others trying to understand how. I survived because I'm different. Broken," they said. The guards were getting closer. Through their link, Sarah formed a plan. "Not broken," she thought back. "Just different enough to survive. Can you use my implant to push them back?" Zyra nodded. Sarah felt energy building between them. When the first guard turned the corner, Zyra released a pulse of psychic force through Sarah's neural implant. The guard flew backward, crashing into his companions. "Run." Sarah grabbed Zyra's hand. They sprinted past the stunned guards, Sarah supporting most of Zyra's weight. More alarms blared. Through their link, Sarah could sense dozens of Vask converging on their position. But she could also sense something else, Zyra's growing strength as their connection deepened. "Left." Zyra's voice guided her. "There's a maintenance shaft. They think it's too small for their bodies." They found the shaft where Zyra indicated. It was narrow, tough for Sarah in her combat suit, impossible for the larger Vask. They crawled inside just as more guards arrived. As they moved through the shaft, Sarah felt Zyra trembling. "The experiments," Zyra explained through their link. "They were trying to understand how to break through psychic defenses. If they succeed, they could enslave entire species, make them think and feel whatever the Vask want." Sarah thought about her own people. Humans were just starting to explore psychic abilities. They would have no defense against something like that. "We need evidence," Sarah decided. "Proof to show the Galactic Council." "The data is in the central lab," Zyra replied. "But it's heavily guarded." Sarah checked her weapon and smiled grimly. "Good thing you've got a human soldier with you then. We're pretty good at impossible missions." Through their link, she felt Zyra's surprise and hope. Together, they moved deeper into the station's maze of maintenance tunnels, while behind them, the Vask began tearing the station apart in their search. Sarah and Zyra crawled through the narrow maintenance tunnels for what felt like hours. The metal walls pressed close around them, and the only light came from Zyra's faintly glowing skin patterns. Through their mental link, Sarah could feel Zyra's exhaustion growing. "We need to rest," Sarah whispered, finding a wider section where two tunnels crossed. "You're getting weaker. The Vask are still hunting us." Zyra's voice echoed in Sarah's mind. "They won't stop. Then we'll make them stop." Sarah checked her weapon and pulled out an emergency ration bar from her suit pocket. "Here, eat this. It's not tasty, but it'll help." As Zyra ate, their mental connection pulsed stronger. Suddenly, Sarah saw flashes of memory, not her own, but Zyra's. She saw a beautiful world with crystal cities floating in the sky, filled with luminary going about their lives. Then she saw Vask ships arriving, the cities falling, people screaming. "I'm sorry," Zyra said quietly. "Sometimes memories leak through the link. I saw some of yours too. You were a prisoner once." Sarah nodded. 5 years ago, pirates had captured her patrol ship. She'd spent 3 months in their prison before escaping. "Maybe that's why I couldn't ignore your call. I know what it's like to be caged." A loud crash echoed through the tunnels. The Vask were getting closer. "They're cutting through the walls," Zyra warned. "We need to move." They started crawling again, faster now. Sarah's combat suit was getting scratched up from the tight space, but she didn't care. Through their link, she could sense Vask soldiers above and below them, searching methodically. They reached a vertical shaft. Sarah looked up, She could see regular maintenance lights about 30 feet above. That might lead to a main corridor. Can you climb? I think so. Zaira grabbed the ladder rungs. The experiments weakened my body, but not my mind. They climbed slowly. Sarah went last, ready to catch Zaira if she fell. Through their connection, she sent encouragement, sharing her own strength. Halfway up, Zaira froze. Above us, she warned. Sarah looked up to see a vast face peering down the shaft. Its gray skin reflected the maintenance lights as it raised its weapon. Down. Sarah pulled Zaira off the ladder just as energy bolts exploded where they had been. They fell several feet before Sarah caught another ladder rung with one hand, grabbing Zaira with the other. Hold on. Sarah swung them toward a side tunnel. They tumbled through the opening as more shots flew past. There. Zaira pointed ahead. I sense an empty lab. We can get out of these tunnels there. They crawled faster, hearing the Vask trying to follow. But they were too big for the maintenance tunnels. Sarah found the lab's access panel and kicked it open. They dropped into a small laboratory filled with strange equipment. Sarah helped Zaira to her feet, then sealed the panel behind them. They're coming from all directions, Zaira said, her glowing patterns pulsing with effort as she sensed their pursuers. Too many to fight. Sarah looked around the lab quickly. Her military training kicked in, evaluating everything as a potential weapon or tool. Then we don't fight. We trick them. Your people, the Luminary. You were known for being clever, right? Zaira nodded, a small smile appearing on her tired face. Very clever. The Vask hated that about us. They prefer direct force. Perfect. Sarah started grabbing equipment. Because humans, we're pretty good at being clever too. Especially when we're backed into a corner. Through their mental link, Sarah shared her plan. Zaira's eyes widened, then she nodded. Together, they began preparing their trap, knowing they had only minutes before the Vask found them. Sarah worked quickly, connecting wires and power cells from the lab equipment, while Zaira kept watch with her psychic senses. Their makeshift trap was almost ready, but time was running out. They're getting closer, Zaira warned. 2 groups from the left corridor, 3 from the right. Through their mental link, Sarah could feel Zaira's fear mixing with determination. Almost done, Sarah said, connecting the last wire. But we got maybe 5 minutes before this place is swarming with Vask. There's something I need to know. She looked at Zaira. What were they really trying to do to you? What's so important they'd risk war to keep it secret? Zaira's glowing patterns dimmed. Through their connection, Sarah felt a wave of horror and sadness. They want to control everything, Zaira said quietly. Every species, every mind, every thought. The Vask believe order is perfect and free will is chaos. Sarah felt memories flood through their link. Zaira strapped to machines, screaming as the Vask tried to break through her natural mental defenses. They studied my people because we were naturally resistant to mind control. They killed the others trying to understand how we block psychic attacks. But you survived, Sarah said, remembering what Zaira had mentioned earlier. Because you're different. Zaira nodded. My mind, it doesn't work like other Luminary. Where they could block psychic powers, I can reflect them. Turn them back on the attacker. The Vask couldn't break me, so they studied me instead. They're trying to create a weapon that can control entire populations at once. Sarah's blood ran cold. Mind control on a massive scale. Yes, they've already tested it on smaller species. Once they perfect it, Zaira shuddered. No one will even know they're being controlled. They'll think the Vask's thoughts are their own. Want what the Vask want them to want. That's why you called for help, Sarah realized. You knew what would happen if they succeeded. I called for months, Zaira said. But only you heard me. Only you came. Her patterns glowed brighter. The Vask think humans are too primitive to have psychic potential. They don't understand that sometimes being different, being primitive, makes you stronger. Suddenly, Their link blazed with warning. "They're here." Zira grabbed Sarah's arm. The lab doors burst open. Vask soldiers poured in, their weapons raised. Behind them came a taller Vask wearing a scientist's robes. "Fascinating," the scientist said, looking at Sarah and Zira. "The specimen has formed a neural link with the human. Perhaps we underestimated their species' potential." "Stay back," Sarah warned, raising her pistol. "We know what you're planning. The Galactic Council won't let you get away with this." The scientist made a sound like grinding rocks. A Vask laugh. "The Council. They will believe what we tell them to believe. Soon, everyone will." Sarah smiled. "Want to bet?" She pressed a button on her combat suit. The equipment she'd been connecting sparked to life. Every screen in the lab lit up, showing recordings of Zira's memories. The experiments, the tests, the proof of the Vask's plans. "Emergency broadcast," Sarah said, "sending on all frequencies, including the Council's private channels. Good luck explaining this away." The scientist's face twisted with rage. "Kill them both." But Zira was faster. Through their link, Sarah felt power surge. Zira's ability to reflect psychic energy, combined with Sarah's neural implant, created something new, something the Vask hadn't planned for. A wave of pure mental force exploded outward. The Vask staggered, their weapons dropping from suddenly numb hands. "Run!" Sarah grabbed Zira's hand. They sprinted past the stunned Vask into the corridor beyond. Behind them, alarms screamed and voices shouted, but Sarah didn't slow down. They had revealed the truth. Now they just had to survive long enough for help to arrive. Sarah and Zira ran through the Vask station's corridors, alarms blaring around them. Their broadcast had worked. The evidence was out. But now it seemed like every Vask on the station was hunting them. The docking bay. Sarah gasped as they ran. "We need to get back to my shuttle." Through their mental link, Zira's voice came urgently. "We can't. They've destroyed it. I can sense the wreckage." They skidded to a halt at a junction. Sarah's mind raced. No shuttle meant no escape. They were trapped. There. Zira pointed to a sign on the wall, strange Vask symbols that Sarah couldn't read. "Emergency pods. Like your escape pods, but bigger." More Vask soldiers appeared at the end of the corridor. Energy bolts exploded around them as Sarah and Zira dove behind a metal column. "Too many," Sarah said, firing back with her pistol. "We'll never make it to the pods." Zira's patterns glowed brighter. "Maybe we don't have to run." Through their link, Sarah felt an idea forming. "The station's power core. It's near here. If we can reach it, we can set up a defense." Sarah finished the thought. She smiled grimly. "Good thinking. Sometimes the best way to run is to stand and fight." They changed direction, moving deeper into the station. Sarah's combat training and Zira's psychic senses helped them avoid the main groups of soldiers, but they could hear the Vask hitting closer. The power core was a massive chamber filled with humming machines. Blue energy pulsed through transparent tubes, powering the entire station. Sarah's neural implant tingled from the energy. "Perfect," she said, looking around. "Lots of cover, only 2 main entrances. We can hold them here." They worked quickly, using Sarah's military experience and Zira's knowledge of Vask technology. They overloaded power conduits to create barriers of energy, rigged machines to spark and explode if tampered with. "They're coming," Zira warned. Her face was tired, but determined. "Hundreds of them." Sarah checked her pistol. Only a few shots left. "Zira, listen. When they come, I'll hold them off. You need to." "No." Zira's voice was firm, both in Sarah's mind and out loud. "We fight together. You taught me that. Showed me how to stop being afraid." Their mental link hummed with shared emotion. Fear, courage, friendship. Sarah nodded. "Together then." The first wave of Vask hit their defenses like a storm. Energy weapons flashed, machines exploded, and the air filled with smoke and chaos. Sarah's pistol found its targets, while Zara's psychic powers, amplified by Sarah's implant, threw soldiers backward. More coming, Zara warned. There, wait. Her eyes widened. Something's happening. Suddenly, new alarms started blaring. A voice echoed through the station's speakers in multiple languages. This is the Galactic Council Defense Force. The station is surrounded. Surrender immediately. Through the chamber's viewing windows, Sarah saw ships appearing, dozens of them, dropping out of faster-than-light travel. The council had received their broadcast. The Vask soldiers hesitated, confused. Their scientist leader pushed through them, rage twisting his gray face. "Kill them," he screamed. "Kill them now." He raised his weapon at Sarah. Sarah leaped without thinking, pushing her friend aside. The energy bolt caught her in the shoulder, spinning her around. Sarah, Zara's scream was both mental and physical. Pain exploded through their link. But something else happened too. All of Zara's fear turned to anger. Her power, combined with Sarah's neural implant, created a psychic shockwave that threw every Vask in the chamber against the walls, knocking them unconscious. As council troops began boarding the station, Zara held Sarah carefully. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Please, you're my first real friend in so long." Sarah managed a smile through the pain. "Not going anywhere. Someone's got to show you all the good things about being different." Around them, justice was finally arriving. They had won. 3 months after the events at the Vask Research Station, Sarah Chen stood before the Galactic Council. The Great Chamber was filled with representatives from hundreds of species. Even the Vask were there, though their delegation was much smaller now after their crimes had been exposed. Sarah's shoulder had healed, though sometimes it still ached where the energy bolt had hit her. She wore her formal military uniform, complete with the new medals she'd received. Going AWOL to save Zara had nearly ended her career, but exposing the Vask's plans had changed everything. Zara stood beside her, wearing traditional luminary robes that seemed to flow like water. Her skin patterns glowed with healthy brightness now. Though they no longer shared the intense mental link from their escape, a faint connection remained, enough to sense each other's feelings. "The council has reached its decision," the chief speaker announced. His voice echoed through the chamber. "The Vask Empire will surrender all research into psychic control. Their territories will be reduced, and they will pay damages to the surviving luminary." Sarah felt Zara's joy through their faint link. After so many years, justice had finally come. Furthermore, the speaker continued, "We recognize the need to protect species with unique mental abilities. A new division will be created, the Psychic Protection Agency." Staff Sergeant Chen stepped forward. Sarah moved forward, standing straight and tall. "Your actions, though against military protocol, saved countless lives. You showed us that being different, being what some call primitive, can be a strength. Will you lead this new agency?" Sarah smiled. "On one condition, sir." She looked at Zara. "I want my friend as my partner. No one understands these dangers better than she does." The speaker nodded. "Granted, the agency is yours to build." Later, in the gardens outside the council chamber, Sarah and Zara watched the sunset. 3 suns of different colors painted the sky in beautiful patterns. "I never thought I'd see this day," Zara said softly. "My people hiding, scattered across the galaxy. Now we can come home. Build again." "You'll build something better," Sarah said. "And this time, you'll have help." Zara turned to her friend. "The mental link we shared during our escape. I miss it sometimes, being that connected to someone who understood." "Me too." Sarah touched her neural implant. "But maybe that's okay. Some things are special because they don't last forever. What matters is what we do with what we learned from each other." A small ship landed nearby. Their new transport, marked with the symbols of their agency. They had work to do. Reports were coming in of other species being experimented on, other stations hidden in dark corners of space, ready to go save more people. Sarah asked, standing up. Zira smiled, her patterns glowing brighter. With my clever human friend. Always. As they walked to their ship, Sarah thought about how it all started, with a cry for help that only she could hear. One small difference that changed everything. Their ship lifted off, heading toward the stars. There would be more adventures, more challenges. But now they faced them together. The human soldier and the luminary survivor, showing the galaxy that being different wasn't a weakness. It was a strength. And somewhere in the depths of space, other voices were calling, waiting for someone brave enough to listen. Sarah and Zira would be there to answer, proving that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe wasn't advanced technology or psychic power. It was simply being willing to help someone in need. As their ship disappeared into the starlit sky, their story became legend. How one brave human soldier and one unique luminary survivor had changed the galaxy forever, all because they dared to be different. The end.